Um, Everything is sessions. Mike. Okay. I think this is better. Just now there's some issue with the mic audio. Okay. So yep, as usual, we'll get started for today's session over here. I'll run through the markets, okay, and highlight some of the key opportunities available. And we'll see if you guys have any questions. Then we can run through them as well. Okay. So yep. Let's start with the dollar index over here. Okay, so first up, if you're looking at this on a 4 hour time frame, what I'm expecting right now is the market is actually taking out this low, right? Which basically means that we are definitely testing some sort of a key level. Now, there's no concrete conclusion as to whether we're gonna see a bounce or not as of now, because price is basically still testing it. But what we want to see is how price will react from here, right? Because if this is the low and the price actually takes it out and starts to bounce back up with certain momentum, we can then see this as a liquidity sweat, right? And then that would opens up more upside, potentially retesting back this zone. Okay, so we're definitely as what we call a at a crossroad. Okay, so dollar index over now. For now, you probably just want to be patient. Maybe wait out until tomorrow and see how price is going to develop from here first. Okay. Then we have the euro. Okay. Same thing here, right? Basically, it's the inverse of it. So it's testing the high. We definitely want to give it until tomorrow and see how price is going to react off this swing high first. Okay. Now, if I zoom out quite a bit, we can see that overall, we have this as a high and then the market push back in three wave. There's a good possibility that this is developing as a leading diagonal here as well, right? But if that's going to be a leading diagonal, in any case, we are still kind of expecting this to come down, right? Before the push up, right? So again, there are multiple potential patterns that this can turn into. Whether is it a leading diagonal from this low, we're also expecting that pullback, or if this is just simply a 1 2, in terms of expanding flat, we are still expecting that pullback, right? So in the case, that's the primary take for it at this moment. But obviously, you want to wait for price to give us a bit more clue how it's going to develop off this high before kind of committing to that. Okay, so yep, keep an eye on it. I think we're probably gonna get a little bit more clue after tomorrow. Okay. So William asks, are we observing whether DXY will also take the early July low? Don't really look. I don't really think that this low is currently the key focus first, right? But obviously, if market continue to go lower, then that might be the key level to keep an eye on. But at this moment, definitely we are testing the first level of interest. Okay, so we just want to see how price is going to react off here, right? Now, given obviously if price just continue to move lower without any sort of a reaction, right? Meaning tonight going to tomorrow, if price just comes down like that, right, then definitely this becomes a key level to keep an eye on, right? Then that will open up a possibility of maybe this is going to be a double bottom. Okay, so yeah, right now it's testing the key level, so we just wait and see how price is going to react off that. Okay, pound dollar is quite clear in terms of the direction to focus. Okay, naturally it's going to be bullish as long as price continue to respect this invalidation level. But in terms of like trade, you definitely want to wait for price to pull back first, right? You don't want to be buying at the top, right? So you obviously want to wait for the pullback. That would then open up a buy trade setup for us. Okay, so again, probably need a little bit of time. Maybe the setup might be completed going into end of this week, maybe on Thursday or Friday, right? If tonight, tomorrow morning, price starts to pull back, then setup can potentially complete by Friday this week, and then that's where our opportunities to get involved in the trade. Okay. So pretty clear, right? Pound dollar. I would have this definitely in my watch list. Earlier last week, earlier this week, we do have a setup, but of course, price continue to just push higher, so we need to just wait and for price to pull back first, right? Okay. Aussie dollar pretty similar to the pound in a way where we have some sort of a clear direction that we can look out for. Okay. Just to clean up a little bit, what I'm seeing here, if I zoom out a bit further, right? We do have this as a potential pullback, right? And of course, price managed to push higher and take out all these highs here. So naturally, that would be a bullish directional bias, and it's currently still pushing higher, right? So I would love to see some sort of a pullback, potentially towards this area here at 6,580. That would present a nice decent pullback, and then we can look for a buy, right? So very similar to the pound, I would want to wait for a pullback before committing to the upside. Okay. Dollar Canadian, very nicely still pushing lower. Just a little bit unfortunate that we did not get tag in here, right? That was a setup late last week. Can show you a little bit in the top process on that, but we didn't got tag in. There was a setup, but price didn't pull back deep enough to tag our entry, and then it's moving very nicely right now. The expectation is obviously for this to continue lower and come back towards this key level at 1.3720, right? Around this zone is where we do expect some sort of a reaction, but for now, I don't see any. Obviously, you don't want to be selling as price is going down, right? So I think in terms of like dollar Canadian in the short term, there might not be any setup already. Just very quickly show you on that. Okay, the initial setup was here last Friday, where we actually look to potentially get involved around 3870, right? Price pulls back towards like 3865. Kind of like having a 15 pips of difference here, but it is what it is, right? We're not gonna be like catching every move. But obviously, if you took a slightly different approach, depending on your setup itself, if you traded the breakout, this was a very solid trade, right? Yeah, so I mean, there are definitely more than one way you can have a setup to get involved in a trade, right? There's no like one best way, but what I do here is just simply trading the retracement. This one here did not hit the retracement entry, right? So yep. Okay, so that's the take on dollar CAD, right? We're essentially still expecting price to continue to push lower, and the key level here right now is at 3720. Okay, dollar yen. Dollar yen, to be honest, I am slanting my view towards the possibility that this can push higher from here, potentially to come back and retest this area, but I'm just a little bit more cautious because on a lower time frame, let me just bring you down, right? So we're doing like the multiple time frame perspective. This push itself to the upside, there wasn't any sort of a clear imbalance that were left behind, right? The difference is that if there was an impulsive push and the market left behind imbalance somewhere there, this would have been a pretty nice little trade because we have that three-wave push, and then if it comes into the market imbalance with the Fed confluence, that will be a decent buy setup that I will be interested in, right? But you can see on a lower time frame there wasn't anything, and obviously on a higher time frame that's like not the clearest structure of this expectation to the upside. So that's the part where I'm not really kind of looking at any trade, right? So dollar yen, to be honest, if this just continue to push higher here, then I'll be looking at possibility to sell the dollar yen around that 149 zone. Okay, Yeah, so I mean right now if you took a look at this, this is basically in a consolidation phase, right? So if you're more conservative, the suggestion is obviously just be patient until price comes towards either the top zone or the bottom zone. Then we'll see how price is gonna react off that. Okay, so that's on dollar yen. Gold, obviously very clear, very strong move to the upside. Um, if you are holding on to the buy, again depending on your horizon, I would say just hold on to it, right? Is there more upside? Is gold gonna break new highs? I'm very confident on that. But obviously, if you're trading the CFD of things, then you need to be paying the swap fee, right? Depending on your platform as well. But if you're looking at long-term move, then obviously GLD, which is basically an ETF that tracks the price of gold, would be better for you to be buying into, right? Because you don't need to pay overnight fees on GLD. Okay, which I do have a position on GLD as well as SLV, which is gold and silver, which obviously they're doing pretty well. Those are very long term position because I've been in gold or GLD since back in 2022, right? So that's like almost close to 3 years on that position itself already. Yeah, so fundamentally, I think from a macro angle, precious metal, gold and silver, eventually they'll keep hitting, upside. The only drawback in investing in GLD and SLV obviously is that they don't provide any dividends, right? So, that's the only opportunity cost you need to be weighing, right? But in terms of like overall direction, my sentiment on the precious metal is basically the same as your US index in terms of equities, right? Um, they are just going to go higher because of how the market is functioning right now based on um, the valuation of your currencies are often going to be devaluing over time. Then naturally, precious metals are just going to go higher from that. Okay, so from a trading perspective, you would want to wait for some sort of a pullback before looking for the buy. So right now, I don't think there will be any setup moving forward in the near term until price actually do a nice decent pullback, right? Very similar is of course silver here. You would want to just wait for the pullback before really like looking for any buy, right? So it's more like a patient part of trading right now if you're looking at gold and silver, right? You just want to wait for the pullback to develop first. On other side of the commodity space on crude oil, we do have something setting up right now. Okay, what I'm seeing over here is we have the swing high, which price came up very nicely, around this area, break that high, made an impulsive push down, and then right now it's doing a pullback, right? And this pullback, as of today, looks very corrective in nature. We have a nice little WXY tree of structure as well, so we have that as a key level, right? So we are looking at the sell side of things right now. Will this keep dropping perpetually? Obviously no, right? But there's also a good possibility that this will just turn into some sort of an ending diagonal. But even if it's gonna be just an ending diagonal, I think the downside is sufficient for us to capitalize on, right? And if you look at it on an hourly time frame, we do have some of the conditions criteria fulfilled for a setup, right? We have the liquidity swept, we have price coming down, did a little bit of tiny consolidation here and a continued push, breaking that low. So the hourly here may not be the cleanest chart. That's where I actually went to the 2 hour. Okay, and you can see there's that one candle of a retracement, so that's basically your order block from SMC perspective, and we have that nice confluence of the 67 fit, right? So that's the setup, right? So if price can continue to pull back towards 64.5 correctively, we may have a sell trade setup on crude oil with a target at the swing low, right? Now this one here, I don't really expect price to move like way lower than that swing low. I would say if we can catch a trade here and then price move towards the target, hits our target, great. That's already a very solid trade, right? So not really looking for extended target on this. Essentially for price, the expectation is for price to hit this and come back down, retest, and then potentially start bouncing. Okay, so yep, that's on crude oil. We'll keep track on how this is going to develop. Okay, then we have S&P 500, which is again, you can see very, very bullish in terms of the momentum. So definitely upside, right? Definitely upside. Just wait for it to pull back. Same thing as gold. Okay, so nothing much to really talk about this until price starts to pull back. Okay, you don't want to be buying at the top, obvious reason. Pound yen. Okay, pound yen is developing something very, very interesting that might open up, if not closer towards the end of this week, then potentially next week. Okay, I think you can see right now on the forward chart, right, how this is developing higher. It's really not going with momentum, and we are expecting after price takeouts all this area, there's a good possibility this will come back down to retest this low. Okay, and that's what I'm interested in. But for me to be getting involved and looking for a sell trade setup, I would love to see an impulsive move down first, right? At least taking out some of these inner lows, right? That's the part where the market is showing sign it wants to reverse. Then only I'll be looking at that, right? So how would that look out in the hourly chart, right? Is we want to see some sort of an impulsive break, right? Obviously we want to see with momentum, right? Meaning impulsive push. Market needs to leave behind fair value gaps or market imbalance, right? And it takes up all this low, right? So you kind of envision it a little bit, right? You kind of imagine if this is going to come down impulsively. Let's just say I'm going to take an example of it, right? I'll just take something like this here, right? Okay, if this develops, okay, then what you can see, right, is that we have this high here as a liquidity sweep, this here as a break of structure, and obviously with the impulsive move that leaves behind some sort of a market imbalance, right? And then from there you take your fib. That's where all the setup comes in, right? So that's a little bit of what we call a forecast, right? You can anticipate, what you want to see or what you want the market to develop, to prep for a potential trade. Okay, so obviously to do that you need to be very clear, like what is your setup, right? Then you can start to plan the various scenario, right? If the market does this, then I will get this, right? And if I get this, I can then proceed to have a setup, and then I can proceed to look for trade and things like this, right? So this is definitely in a watch list. Currently still developing, but haven't really confirmed that yet. So we'll keep watch on this. Okay. Then we have the Aussie yen, right? So Aussie yen here is definitely bullish. You can see the momentum. The market managed to take out all these highs. We're waiting for the pullback. Now, whenever we wait for a pullback, right? If you're more into like capitalizing on shorter term trades, it does sometimes open up to the retracement trade idea as well, which means if I'm expecting this to pull back in the short term, I can look to sell, right? So if you look at Aussie yen on the lower time frame here, okay, we may get an opportunity to sell again. Just bear in mind the context of things, right? Because you're looking to trade a pullback, it's a retracement trade. The odds is a little bit lower, the probability is a little bit lower, it's a little bit more aggressive in a way. So you might want to also consider that, right, whenever you make a decision on whether to trade a pullback, right? It's kind of like the idea of like taking counter trend. Okay, now if you ask me, is there a setup here building up on the Aussie yen? Yes, right, in a way. If you look at this, okay, not the perfect sweep of liquidity, not a perfect double top, but it's still technically a valid one, where price kind of tested the top but didn't really break it. And we have, if you're familiar with double top, okay, we have that neckline broken as well. Okay, and of course, through this process, we have that market imbalance there, right? And of course, if you start to pull in fibs, right, from swing high to swing low, we have a nice little confluence of the fib. I wouldn't put a pending order today. Okay, the reason is because this is just a singular pullback. Okay, you know that I combine with Elliott wave principles, right? So, the higher probability kind of setup is we want this pullback to be corrective, which means ideally we want this to develop in something like that. We want it to be pulling back a little bit slower than this down move, right? So if you do a little bit of time projection, this will be on the 70th step, which is essentially tomorrow around London time. Okay, I mean, if based on the projection of how this is going to develop, that will be somewhere around London time tomorrow, which is great, right? Which means we have sufficient time to look at this tomorrow morning. If it pulls back like that and then the market's still basically there, this can be a valid sell trade for tomorrow, right? And of course, you can see it's pretty tight, right? Because your entry is around at 98.20. Your stop is probably 98.40. It's a 20 pip stop, right? A 20 pip stop on Aussie yen is relatively tight. But I'm not saying that it's not possible. And of course, the nice thing about this is with a tight stop, your risk reward can be quite decent, right? You probably wouldn't just aim for here for 1:2. I would say you can really go for the part where if you really want, look at areas around this, which is bringing you to 97-ish area, right? Which is somewhere there, right? So I mean, if you want, you can even just aim for 97.5. That's about 1:3.3, which is already very, very decent. If you go to 97.10, that's a 5.4 risk to reward ratio, right? Yeah, so that's something that you can look up for moving forward, right? I might consider including this setup tomorrow. Okay. Okay, then we have the pound odd. Okay, pound odd over here right now, we are expecting this pullback towards the zone, and then we can look to sell. If you go down to the lower time frame, I don't really have a clear convincing setup at this moment, right? Based on the setup that I'm using. But obviously you can see that this is a very, very decent channel development, right? So simple Elliott wave perspective, this will be your 3-wave development. Okay, let me just very, very quickly change the degree of that. Okay, and then you'll be expecting another 3-wave development here, right? Some sort of something like this. And overall, you'll be looking at it as a bigger 3-wave development. Okay, so based on this, we will be expecting the pullback to complete somewhere around 2.0485, right? So this is the expectation of how price would likely develop. Okay, so if you look at this here on the lower time frame, right, 2.0485, you go back higher time frame, it's around there, right? It's around at 15,618 on a higher time frame as well. So that's a little bit of a nice confluence. Of course, if you stretch left, you can see that that's where the previous market has reacted off it. Yeah, if you're looking at this kind of setup here, there is a valid one. Okay, but if you're looking from an SMC perspective from a setup, then there isn't a clear one that we can look to trade. Okay, so again, just want to show you similar chart, similar trade idea. You can have multiple different setups in your toolbox, okay, that you can actually utilize to engage in the market if you want to. Okay, so typically, if you're using the Fib plus wave theory kind of setup, we would use the 618 here, okay, 1618 here as a stop, and essentially your entry, you're going to be somewhere around 100%, and then stop is about like 70 pips. Target down here is about 1:2. Okay, if you want to go for further targets, yeah, I personally wouldn't suggest further targets. I mean, based on this particular trade, based on the context of things, if you can get involved in the trade and then price just basically come back to the target here at this previous low, that is good enough. Okay. Yeah, so that's something that you can keep an eye on if you are interested in for pound AUD. Okay. Lastly, here is Bitcoin. So yeah, if you take a look at Bitcoin development, after the break, price came back down, break that low as well, and then it starts to bounce higher, break that high. So that gives me the sign that perhaps this downside pullback has been completed and we can start to look for maybe upside, right? So this is where I would say if we can get some sort of a corrective pullback towards the key level here, 112, 110, okay, we can then expect some sort of bounce back higher. So yeah, without further pullback, you want this to be corrective. If it comes into this territory, we can start to look for trade setup from there. Okay, if you're into like cryptocurrencies, I think. But for now, you just want to wait for the pullback to occur first. Okay. Yeah. So generally, those are the things that I have on my list. Okay. Very quickly, I see over here Novell asking about the Canadian yen. We can take a look at that. Okay, let me clean up a little bit on this. Okay, I would say Canadian yen, or in fact, because of pound yen, we're looking at downside. Or yen, we're looking at a pullback. I think CAD yen here has a nice little alignment in a way, I would say. Okay, we have a few liquidity sweeps as the market is developing lower, right? You can see that. Break that high, rejection, break that high, rejection. So this would start to establish as our invalidation level, right? We'll take that as our key. Okay. So what we look out for here is obviously price is pulling back, right? This is on a forward, just bear that in mind, right? The only key market imbalance left, okay, is there. Which is okay, I would say, because if this is gonna correctively develop towards that, that can present a pretty nice little decent opportunity to sell it as well, right? If you go down to the hourly, then you don't really get anything, to be honest. Okay. So I would say personally, because I don't monitor the CAD yen on a regular basis, right? But if I were to choose between some of the yen pairs that we can access to, like CAD yen, AUD yen, right? We talk about that. Pound yen. Okay, we talk about that. I would put a little bit more emphasis on maybe the AUD yen to really see if we can get a sell trade instead of the CAD yen here. Okay, but of course, this is on a forward chart, which means for price to reach towards our key level, it might take some time. You can definitely still keep an eye on that, right? Because if this comes into this territory and then on the lower time frame, it gives you that nice, decent setup. Okay, you can still consider selling that, right? Yeah, so that's my take on it. Hopefully it's clear. All good. Okay, so I think this last week and so far this week has been relatively slower in terms of the setups that we have. Okay, but I think it's just part of the market phases, right? Because we did get some nice little impulsive move for the past 2 weeks, so the market is now transiting into some sort of a consolidation corrective phase. But I think as we progress into like closer towards next week, some of this corrective phase may be completed and we can start to see some impulsive move as well, right? So the market is always in this cycle, right? After an impulsive move, there's a chance that it will go into a corrective phase, and during a corrective phase, you just need to be patient, okay? Because um, the market is basically in a consolidation, and you don't want to be, getting trapped in the ups and downs of this movement when the market is just basically consolidating. All good. Okay, so I hope today's session here give you guys some clarity going into this week, right? And what are some of the things that you can keep an eye on for, right? It's not really a lot on the table, but I think there's still definitely some opportunities here and there that is worth noting, okay? And if there isn't, we just be patient and wait for the next clear setup to occur for us, okay? So, yep, that's all from me then. Okay, don't see any other questions here. So all the best for the week, and we'll see you guys in the next session. Okay, all the best. See you guys next week.